And I look down and on Toaster's head is a strand of yarn. And I'm like, what the heck? And then I realized that that strand of yarn goes all the way out into the middle of the yard. Hey everyone, it's Natalie, also known as Knitty Natty. Welcome to episode 294 of the Love and Stitches podcast. I am buzzing with energy this week. I don't know what it is. Maybe it is that I've finally caught up on rest after traveling. We've been back at my parents' now for a month. I think, yeah, over a month, I think. So maybe I'm just finally getting into the swing of things, but I think it has a lot to do with my knitting in general because I have made some really good progress this week. I don't want to spoil everything that's coming up, but I do have a very cute FO. I have finally, thanks to your help, figured out seaming on my blanket. And I also have a plan to attack my WIPs. I found some more lingering WIPs. And I have a plan for that for November. So, I want to tell you about this. And then we'll get into all those projects. So this week I am wearing my Skyline tee by Tori Yu. I made it out of yarn from Ruby and Roses. It's their BFL lace and I held it double to get fingering weight. And it's so cozy and comfy, especially on a rainy day. I don't think you can really tell outside. Also, I think my lights may be reflecting a little bit in the window, but it is cold and rainy and perfectly fall. So cuddle up, get your project, and let's get into the episode. All right, first this week, I would love to tell you about a finished object that I have, and it's so adorable. They are still wet. I washed them yesterday, but I didn't put them through my spin dryer, so they didn't dry overnight. That's okay. I don't need them to be dry yet, but they are my baby Ruffle socks. How cute are these? They're so tiny. They are so precious and sweet. So if you remember, last week I finished the adult version of the Ruffle socks. This is a pattern by Pearl Soho. I did make a couple of modifications. I changed the gauge, I changed the stitch count, and I also subbed in a Fish Lips Kiss heel. But all in all, the pattern is similar. I did similar length in the leg because they're like an ankle sock. And I loved this little ruffle pattern. So this is for my sister-in-law who is expecting, and these are for her baby. So I'm really excited to gift these to her. Her shower is coming up in just a couple of weeks, and I think it's going to be so fun for her to receive these. She knows I'm going to be knitting some things. I also have a blanket planned that I'm hopefully going to get to cast on this week, but I wanted to have something to gift at her shower. So I think what I'm going to do is get a box and I'm gonna wrap in tissue paper and have these socks on the top, right? So she'll open it up and she'll see these socks and be like, oh, so cute, like little baby socks. They're adorable. And then underneath the tissue paper will be her socks, because I think that's just a fun element of surprise. Obviously, a lot of the things that people receive at baby showers are for the baby, which in turn are for the parents, right? But you don't always get something that's actually for you. So I hope she loves these. I really love how they came out. I think I've cleaned up my project bag, which is rare for me to do, but I was, again, feeling very energetic and motivated this week. So I got everything cleaned up and I totally forgot to bring down the label for this yarn, but it is a yarn that I used for a crochet top earlier this summer. And I had leftovers. I still have about a skein left, actually. So I used the leftovers. It's from 29 Bridges and the color is called Linen, I want to say, and it's on their go-to sock base, which is a 75-25. So I thought that would be great for a baby because, at least for me, I throw my 75-25 yarn cold, delicate in the wash, and then just lay it flat to dry. So I thought that would be easy enough for something that your baby is going to wear. I know the baby's probably not going to wear them that often, but I figured that would be easy enough to do. So a couple of things about this pattern. So the Ruffle Socks pattern is like, I think it has a little kid size to an adult large size, and there was not a baby size. So I did make a lot of customizations on these socks. So I want to talk through those, and I do have everything in my project page of what I did, the numbers and everything, without totally revealing the pattern. This is a paid for pattern, and really the secret sauce is how to do these adorable ruffles. Worth getting the pattern just for that. But there is a range of sizes, but I think the pattern is easily enough customized. So I ended up casting on 110 stitches to start, which is crazy, right? It's a lot of stitches. And then I followed the pattern through all of those decreases and ruffles. And I think my final stitch count was 44 stitches. I was aiming for sort of like a 6 to 12 month size. So these are definitely not newborn socks. I wanted them to be a little on the larger side because I didn't want to gift something that would immediately be out of use if it didn't get used right away. So I'm hoping I've made the right measurements here, and I did put the measurements I was going for in my project page as well. So that worked perfectly, 110 stitches. I knit through and I did a fish lips kiss heel at first. So I have a picture of that, what the fish lips kiss heel looked like, because that's what I did on the adult socks. And I started on the foot and I was just thinking, this just doesn't look right. Like it's not deep enough, the heel. It's not giving enough, you know, like depth across the instep, I guess you could say, kind of like that diagonal measurement from the, you know, cup of your heel to the top of your foot. Like that's a pretty wide space. And especially for babies, they have these squishy, cute little feet, and it just didn't look right. So I ended up pulling that back, and instead I did the world's tiniest heel flap and gusset, and I just kept it in stockinette because I wanted it to match as close as possible to the adult version. So I didn't want to add any extra patterning in. So the adult one for me has a fish lips kiss heel. This one has a heel flap and gusset. I didn't want to, you know, make it too different. So heel flap and gusset, I also wrote how many rows and everything I did, and that worked so much better because now there's so much space right here. I did the little gusset, I worked through the foot, and then I made my first attempt at a toe. So typically when I'm doing a toe, I decrease every other round until I get like a 1.5 inch toe or so. And then I just, you know, graft it there. And I did something really similar on the adult socks. I think I tried to do it a little more rounded. So I decreased every other round, you know, for a while. And then on the last 2 rounds, I just did decrease and then decrease. And so I was planning to do a similar thing on the baby socks. And I also took a picture of that before I ended up taking it out. And you can see that the toe is just looking too pointy. Again, babies have wide, kind of like rectangular, almost squishy square feet, I think, from the research that I did and looking at other, you know, sock patterns. And so I just thought, again, this is not working. So I took it back and I ended up adding more length just on like the straight part and then a very rapid decrease at the toe. So my toe ended up being maybe like 6 rounds or something like that. I think I decreased every other round twice. So that was 4 rounds, and then 2 rounds of just decreasing. So that you still get that roundedness on the end. But see, it's very square and very big. So they're, you know, their little toes are not going to get squished in here. So I'm hoping that that all works for a baby. And we'll find out because I really don't know. I really don't know. Honestly, these could be way bigger than like 12 months even, and I have not a clue because I haven't been around a child that size in a very long time. Probably like since my youngest sibling was that age, which was 20 something years ago. So we're all very excited for the first grandchild in the family, and it will be so fun to give this gift. I cannot even tell you how excited I am. Another huge win this week is my Quilt Too blanket by A Little Nitty Designs. We finally have it figured out, and I say we sincerely because all of your advice has helped me so much. I tried a few more different things this week on the seaming of this blanket, and I have finally come to something that I am happy with, and it feels so good. So let me show you just in general the pattern real quick and what yarn I'm using, and then I'll talk through what I have surmised. So this is the Quilt Too blanket. Look how good it looks. You make 4 different squares with 2 different mini skeins, seam them together, and then eventually these will become like quilt blocks into a blanket. I am using this year's Beetlejuice countdown from A Little Wolf Knits. Here are some of the other upcoming colors. I'm making this for my husband, Kent, and so he's the one opening up the yarn and pairing the colors together, which has been very fun for me because it's one decision off my shoulders and I get kind of a surprise every time he brings me a new set of colors. So I will be working on the squares. They take me several days and then I'll say, okay, I need you to pick another color combination by the end of today, and he'll bring it to me and I'll wind it up and I'll start the next set. Sorry about that. So that's very fun. I did also put out last year's Beetlejuice set here behind me. This is another blanket I made for Kent. And so now he's going to have 2 Beetlejuice blankets, which will be very, very fun. Okay, so my final solution here. And I left one square, oh geez, not entirely sewn up so I could show you this. And I think several people suggested this, and you are just so much smarter than me. Thank you so much for your tips. So here's what we got. Last week I figured out, let me make sure that's right. I did this week sew together. I had almost finished sewing the whole square together and I realized one of the squares was turned the wrong way. So I'm being extra careful now, like triple checking when I'm seaming. Okay, so last week I figured out that putting things together with a single crochet, I am using a D 3.25 millimeter hook for that. I need to put that on my project page actually. So I'm knitting this on a 2.5, US 2.5. I don't know what millimeter size that is. Let me double check here. Let's see, this is the color combination I started today. Isn't it so fun? I'm so excited for this. I just started this one this morning. All right, let's see, where's the, oh, here it is. So 2.5 is a 3 millimeter. So 3 millimeters on the knitting needles. And where did it just go? 3.25 millimeters on the hook. So several of you suggested going up a hook size to get sort of like a looser join when I'm crocheting these together. And I had already done that. I actually started with the same millimeter size, so a 3 millimeter hook, and it was too tight. And so I went up a hook size. So thank you. That was very good advice. And then last week I settled in on doing a single crochet to seam these together versus the slip stitch that I had tried earlier. So that was all good. Like I was happy with my hook size. I was happy with my technique of choice. It was the order of seaming them that was the issue. And also this is what the single crochet looks like, by the way. It's very stretchy. You get like these slight horizontal bars here, which I think are kind of fun. And I'm getting the seam on the back and it's really nice. It pretty much lays flat, so not in the way at all. Okay, so seaming order. What I was doing wrong here. I was trying to use my ends as like, you know, smartly as possible. So I wanted to use one end from each square to seam. So I was trying to seam from the outside in, from the outside in, from the outside in, from the outside in. And I had this massive hole in the middle that just, no matter how I sewed in the ends after that, just really didn't look good. And several of you said, hey, why don't you try seaming 2 squares together, 2 squares together, and then going all the way across with one strand of yarn. So you have one seam across the middle. And that is the solution that worked. So you can see I'm actually this way, I guess. So I put my top 2 squares together, my bottom 2 squares together, and then right now, show you the back, I am working on going all the way across for my final seam. And that makes the middle look so much better. I mean, I guess there's still like a little bit of some holes there, but it's got this nice tidy finish that I feel like is definitely going to be something I can repeat for all the other squares. So they are going to all look the same. They're going to be tidy. They're lying very flat and looking very nice. So I am happy with this. I'm also taking those other 2 ends, and I left those out too so I could show you those other 2 ends. So they come from where I first joined the 2 squares together, and I'm like crossing them. So I tried on one square, I think I just took like the end that comes from this side and wove it in over here, and like vice versa, just kind of like crisscross them to kind of create a little more bulk in the middle. It didn't really do anything. And so on this square, after I was done going across like that long seam to join everything together, I undid my last stitch, grabbed that loop back on the hook, and then just did like one more single crochet across the middle. And honestly, that seems to be pretty much the same as just crisscrossing them and weaving them in. So it doesn't really make that much of a difference, but I'm still really, really happy with it. The one other thing I tried, and now I don't remember which square I did it on. Look, I have finished squares now. Oh, I can't even tell you how good this feels. I was continuing to knit more small squares and not having any, and I didn't have any big squares finished. So it was like kind of making me crazy. Like I can't finish off this project, finish off each square as I go, which I really wanted to do. I was having this like, I don't know, I was really frustrated. I think you could tell in the last few podcasts, I was like just really not feeling good about this project. And now I feel so good about it. I can't even tell you. So I'll just show off this one. I finished. This one, I don't remember which one was my very first one. I think it was this one. Yeah, I have a ton of ends. I have a ton of ends on this one. So this was actually the very first one I did. So I ended up unpicking the slip stitches and joining in some fresh yarn to go across and seam everything. So I repaired it. It's all good. Everything's caught up and done. So the one other thing I tried, because somebody did suggest this too, is instead of going, let's see where I'm at, instead of going like 2 squares together, 2 squares together, all the way across, you could go all the way across, all the way across. Does that make sense? So just 2 long seams. So I did try that. I think I tried it on this square actually, the one that I ended up redoing. So if you look at the center here, yeah, it looks almost identical to the one where I did, oh my gosh, this is hard to show. It looks almost identical, basically, at least to me. So there's the one where I did 2 long seams, and here's the one where I did 1 long seam after doing 2 shorter seams to make a top and the bottom. And to me, it looks no different. And it was much more fiddly to do the 2 long seams for me. Like I just didn't enjoy it. So that's a good solution. I'm sure that a lot of people will find that to be better, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work great for me. So I'm going to continue on with this method where I join the top, join the bottom, top 2, bottom 2, all the way across. So I have an update, and I keep updating my project page while I'm trying things. So I need to go back through now and make sure everything is correct and lined up, but I still wanted to use my ends, right? As much as possible here. So this is what I have figured out. So the first square that I make will have a short end basically, because at the very end of things, actually, let me explain it a different way. 2 squares need to have an end that is 8 times as long. And that's going to be 1 square on the top and 1 square on the bottom. And I'll use that end to do these 2 shorter seams. 1 square, and I believe it's this guy right over here, doesn't need to have a long end at all, because it's going to have, actually, no, it's this one, isn't it? It's this one right here, this top one. It doesn't need to have a long end at all, because I'm going to have one side that ends up with 3 ends. So when I finish the seam, I have that end, I have the end from starting this square, I started with green, and the end from ending this square. So I'll make 2 squares with super long ends, 1 square with a regular end, and then on my final square, I am leaving my ball of yarn attached, and that's the one that I'm using to go all the way across. So this is going to be my new process. I have only just started doing it with this square, so I kind of need to like assimilate to that, but that should work out. And then the position of them does matter. I need to like lay it out and take a picture, like you put the long in here and the short in here and the long in here and the one attached to the ball last, and then that one goes across. So I'll figure it out, and I'll think of a good way to communicate that, but that seems to be the best way to manage the ends, because after you get everything seamed up, you only have a few ends to handle, which is really nice. There's a lot of ends on this, 16 in total, because 4 squares, 2 colors each. Is that right? 4 squares, 2 totals. Oh yeah, 2 colors each and 2 ends per color. So 16 ends. And using them to seam helps you not have to add anything else. Okay, that was a heck of a lot. I do want to talk a little bit about finishing out this project. I talked a little bit about it last week, saying that I like to, like, at some point in a project, kind of go, okay, how long is this actually going to take me? Especially when it's something long-term like this that has a lot of pieces, and it can get to a point where you start to get a little bit bored with it, and you want to see that an end is in sight, right? At least that's how I feel. I don't want to leave this lingering for too long. So I'm definitely not finishing this in October. I knew I wasn't going to finish it in October, but I thought if I could finish it before December 1st, that'd be really great. I have a new blanket that I'm going to start in December with Advent yarn that I'm getting this year, so I'd love to kind of clear the way for that. So I got out my calendar and I got out my notebook and I started to do some planning. So I have now completed almost, once I finish up this one that I left undone, 4 squares. 4 squares and 8 colors, okay? I have a total of, actually I think I have 31 colors, but I think I only have 30 minis, and my 31st color is a full skein, but I need to double check that. There could be 31 minis, but regardless, I'm gonna be able to make 15 squares. If I have 30 minis, you know, divided by 2, that's 15 squares. If I have 31, I'll just have an extra somewhere. And thank you to Kelly for reaching out to me and letting me know. Actually, I think your husband was, like, you know, somewhere in the room when you were watching one of the episodes, and you suggested I can do a 3 square by 5 square. So that way I can use all 15 squares. So 3 by 5 blanket. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so all of that together, I have 8 colors used and 4 squares used. So I have 4 squares done and 11 more to go. I'll have 15 in total. And there are 5 weeks left until December. I'm recording this at the beginning of the week. I think you know where this is going. So my goal now is to do about 2 total pinwheel squares per week, which does break down to 8 squares per week, or about like 8 smaller squares a week, or about 1 square per day, and that is pretty reasonable for me. Each square takes a couple of hours. They are pretty time consuming, but if I get them started in the morning with my morning knitting, I usually take a square with me while I'm walking in the morning, and then by lunchtime I can pretty much finish one up. So that should hopefully be doable and reasonable for me. And then on the weekends, or, you know, whenever I have extra time, I can somehow wrangle in that extra square. So hopefully when you are watching the podcast next week, you're going to see 2 new squares from me. That is the goal. And if I can do 2 squares per week, I'll have all the squares made by the end of November. That's the goal. And hopefully I can do that. And then of course I do need to join it and do a border. So I'm hoping that I get a little bit faster as I go, and I start to realize that I'm getting close to the end. And maybe it's even possible that that last week of November, rather than me finishing up the last few squares, I'm already done with those and I can assemble and do the border. We shall see. No pressure, but that is a good plan. A couple of weeks ago, one of you asked a really good question about lingering WIPs, and I went through all of the hibernating projects in my Ravelry page, a lot of which were already either frogged or given away, and I thought that that was all of my lingering WIPs, and then I went, oh my gosh, I did not consider things that I am more recently active in working on. And so I was doing some cleaning up this week, and I recovered 4 active WIPs. And I really want to get these finished up before the end of November. So let me show them to you and I'll tell you what the plan is. So the first thing that I found is something I cast on super recently. I worked on it for like a day And then I set it aside, and this is just such a shame. But it is my pigskin cozy. So I have teamed up with Jen, Boston Jen, for her pigskin party, and I am sponsoring the month of October. And October has just flown by. So I started this like October 1st, I think. And I worked on it while we did our, or maybe it was October 2nd, when we did our Zoom together. And I did the first set of footballs, and then I just totally stopped working on it because I think I was starting the Beetlejuice blanket and I was very into figuring that out. And I just was like, I'm not coming back to color work. And I even have, here's what it looks like. It's a yarn cozy for a 100-gram cake. And I still haven't even woven in the ends on my first one. This one's for me. This one's for Kent, kind of in Miami Dolphins colors, but I will probably just use it like when I work on projects for him, I guess. So anyway, this thing needs to be done ASAP. This one shouldn't even make it into November. So my goal for this one is finish it by October 31st, which is 4 days away for me right now. And I should definitely be able to finish it. So as soon as I finish my square quota of the day, I'm going to be working on this for the next couple evenings and hopefully getting that totally finished. Let me put this in there. Okay, the next couple things I found are socks that I started pretty recently. So let me see, which ones are these? Nope, I want to talk about these first. I kind of made a priority, order of priority here. So, and I got everything in project bags. I went through and found my project bag like collection, and I pulled some things out because I haven't looked at that in a while. It was very fun to do, actually. So this sock, so tangled up. My gosh. These I'm calling my hiking socks. They are from a yarn that I got in BC that is mohair, I think, and BFL. So it's a really interesting base. It's kind of a finer yarn. I don't know if you can really see that. The stitch definition is really good. And I made these super extra tall. And I'm doing the vanilla is the new black pattern. That's the heel, and I added the ribbing myself. That was a mod that I made. And I am almost done with the first sock already. So after I get the cozy done, it's priority number 1 because I want to finish it in October. I'm going to be working on these socks until they're done. Again, I find for me, I do so much better if I have one goal at a time. So I'm not going to try to work on all these WIPs every single day. I'm going to do the blanket. And then in the evening, I'm going to be working towards finishing one of my lingering WIPs. That's the plan. So after the cozy will be these socks, and so the furthest along. And winter is coming. I'm going to need these. So I think that's going to be really, really great. Now, my loose goal for this is November 15th. I figured that's pretty reasonable. If I take the next 4 days until October 31st to finish the pigskin cozy, then I can spend the next 15 days finishing these socks. I think that's pretty reasonable. And then I have another pair of socks that I started like right before we left Canada. And I found this bag that I love so much that has a little camper van and some gnome guys on it. It's from Beautiful Sister. Really like this one. And that would be my Waterton socks. I need a yarn cozy for this. Oh my gosh. But it's from Polka Dot Creek. And these are the Waterton Lake National Park self-striping socks. I did start them when I was in Waterton Lakes National Park. And as you can see, I needed this needle. And so I literally pulled the needle off, and I will be able to pick up the stitches when I get back to this. So after I do finish those other socks, which I'm prioritizing because they're further along, I will pick back up with these. This is all I have. That's literally it. It's so sad. I've already put a needle in here. I did find another one. So everything is in here ready to go for me. So I figure, even if it takes me till November 15th for that first pair of socks, then I can spend the next 15 days working on finishing these, hopefully still doing my 1 blanket square a day. I'm telling you, I've got like a very clear mind right now to really get things done. I'm so motivated and so excited about it. Now I have one more project that is a much larger project than the cozy and the socks. So I don't see it being reasonable for me to finish in November, and I'm totally cool with that, but I'm still including it in this section because I have a goal for when I want to get it done. And I might have shown this one or talked about it when we talked about lingering WIPs, but I don't think so because I don't have this project marked as hibernating. It's in the top of my Ravelry. And that is my cozy comfort throw that I have really spent like, oh, it's so cold. It's like freezing in here. It almost feels like damp. It's so cold. Anyhow, this is another Little Wolf Knits. So I've got Little Wolf Knits. I'm working on Little Wolf Knits with my Quilt Too, and this is the Schitt's Creek from 2 years ago. I have a lot of Little Wolf Knits yarn. This one is so pretty. It's a garter stitch, basically just a garter stitch blanket where you hold one strand of like a neutral color with your one strand of your like advent or whatever, or your minis. And so it has really subtle, nice striping throughout, mostly because the Little Wolf Knits colors are pretty neutral already. So earlier this year, I think it was in May, I wound up these massive cakes. I have 2 of these, and these are all the minis. They are magic. Oh no, I'm sorry. They're not magic knotted together. I used a Russian join. And then I also did the same thing with my 100 gram skeins of this neutral color. It's also from the Little Wolf Knits. I can't remember what that one's called, but I do have it in my project page somewhere. So this project is so easy. It's like literally just garter stitch. It's a really good movie project. It's a really good nighttime project. And I am not working on it because I just keep casting on other things and other blankets, and it's like too much to have 2 blankets going, right? So this project I am putting 4th in line. So I probably won't get back to it until maybe December, but if we're being super honest, I feel like December is going to be Advent Central, and so I might not be prioritizing this. So for that reason, I decided later. I was thinking January 1st or January 31st, but I think then I decided I want to cast on another blanket in January, so I better go ahead and finish this by the end of the year. Goodness gracious. Okay, so hopefully I finish my Quilt Too blanket by the end of November. And then in December, I know what I was thinking now. I just made these plans. I think in December, maybe I could start out my mornings with 30 minutes of knitting and work on this. That 30 minutes of knitting every day is not going to get this blanket done, but it will get me some progress and some motivation. The project I'm planning to work on for Advent is crochet. You know, now that I'm really thinking about this, I think I'm being unreasonable trying to get this done by the end of the year. I think probably January 31st is more reasonable. I don't want this to linger for too long though, which is why I'm trying to like incorporate it somewhere into December, but that just probably doesn't make sense. I have too many other things I want to do in December, and obviously I have too many things to do in November. So you know what? I think I'm going to make the decision that end of January is totally fine on this, and I'm just going to set this aside for a later time. I think that's the most reasonable thing. But the cozy and the 2 socks, those I really want to get done by the end of November. I'm kind of in my mind going like, no WIP November. I want to have no WIPs going into December 1st. I guess I will have the cozy comfort throw. I definitely will have the cozy comfort throw. But if I can have everything else off my plate, that's going to be such a good feeling. We got some really fun questions this week. I'm actually saving a few of them for next week. So if you don't hear your question here, don't worry, I am planning to get to it. But there are 3 that I wanted to answer today. So the first question is from Angie. How would you recommend preparing for a knit night or social makers gathering? There may be people who have not found a knit group yet and are uncertain. I lead 2 very different groups. My big tip is to have some social knitting. For me, this is a sock or hat travel project in a cute project bag that has no counting or complicated charts, so I can be present with the conversation. That's a really good tip. I'm so happy you included your own because that's really fun. It kind of gave me, it kind of prompted my brain to think of some things. So how would I prepare for a knit night? I have 2 answers for that. And as always, you all are welcome to share your answers too. I love hearing what you think about these questions. So I first want to answer from a host perspective, and then I'm going to answer from like a participant perspective. Even though I realize most of us are going into these groups as participants, I feel like it's something I've been wanting to talk about, hosting things, because it's something that I have felt uncomfortable as a participant going into certain yarn stores in the past. And I don't even want to say certain yarn stores. I feel like it's just in general, it's really hard to be social. And so I want to share some tips for hosts so that you can make other people feel comfortable. How about that? This is not about anyone specifically, I promise. I just realized it, like I've been to a lot of knit nights, a lot of stitch nights, and I know how I want to feel welcomed. So if you are the host, and for most of the time this would be like the employee at the yarn store, or the yarn store owner, or maybe if you've decided to invite people into a group, it would be you, right? You're the host. So my biggest tip for you is to greet everybody. That's literally it. Greet everybody, find out a little bit about them, and introduce them to the group. I feel like this is so important, and it's so hard for me when I go into yarn stores and I don't see this, because I want to do it. It's like my natural inclination is to be like, hey, what's your name? Like, what are you working on? Like, oh, this is so-and-so. They're visiting from Tennessee and they're just here for knit night. Like, having that connection, having somebody who is the designated host to make that connection makes it so much easier, because I feel like most of us, without intending to, we're just a little bit awkward and we don't really want to like stop the conversation that we're having with a friend that we see every week to acknowledge somebody who's coming in new. So that's my tip for the host, whether you are hosting or not. And then my tip as a participant, I really like your tip about bringing something easy to work on. I think that's really, really smart. It's really hard to engage with everybody if you are, head down in your pattern. So I really like that one. I think that's really great. But I think I want to offer a tip regarding the social aspect of things, because there's two sides to it, right? It's really great when you have somebody there who's going to draw you in, but sometimes that is just not going to happen. So I know for me, when I go into a new place and I literally know nobody, I just try to let things not bother me as I'm getting settled in, and just realize that it's going to be a little bit awkward at first. Eventually, you find your seat, you find a space to be, and I try to introduce myself to people, to the person that I'm sitting next to. So I usually actually don't start by introducing myself, because I don't want to be like self-centered around that, but I usually will like ask somebody, I'll say like, hi, I'm Natalie. I'm like, oh, what are you working on? I love doing that. That's a very easy way to get people talking and to chat with people. So what are you working on? And that usually like leads to another conversation. I might do that with a couple of people, and then I just kind of sit and wait, and I wait to hear a topic that I might have something to contribute to, so I can try to join into the conversation. But literally just trying my hardest. Like I go in with the mental prep to be a little more social than my introverted self naturally wants to be. And if I can just get through, like the first 15 to 20 minutes, I feel more relaxed. I feel more part of the group, but it is so awkward in those first few times. So those are my tips. Are those tips that people need? I don't know. I feel like especially for myself, I've lost the natural ability to be able to just like integrate into a group easily. And I genuinely do have to like hype myself up ahead of time. So maybe you're like me and you need those tips. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're a social butterfly. In that case, will you give us some tips? Because help. Help. It's always worth it though, in the end, when you put yourself out there and you go and meet the new group, even if it's an awkward 30 minutes or so, because then eventually you do find people that you click with, and you get to share this passion with other people, and it's 10 out of 10 worth it. So worth it. Okay, next question is from Sheila. When you are knitting, for example, a sweater using more than one skein of yarn, how do you connect the next skein? Do you knit it in, like changing colors, or do you tie a magic knot? I'm making my first cardigan and I do not like how it looks on the inside with adding yarn by weaving it in like a color change. This method never bothered me with socks, maybe because fingering weight is thinner than worsted. Thank you. Okay, this is a really good question. So I know what a magic knot is, and I will say right away, I do not like using magic knot in garments. I use Magic Knot specifically for things more like blankets, where I feel like that Magic Knot is going to get hidden, like in garter stitch or something. So Magic Knot is not a method that I use very often. Actually, I feel like I use it more in crochet than knitting, so I wouldn't recommend Magic Knot. I don't know what technique you're referring to in changing colors. I think there's probably more than one way to add in your yarn when you're changing colors, so I actually don't know exactly what you mean, but I'm happy to share what I do when I'm adding in a new yarn. It's extremely simple. I wish I could. I don't really feel like I have a way to like show this. Let me see with my project here. So when oh my goodness, I feel like a fuzz just came and got me. So when I'm adding in a new yarn, I sometimes will intentionally try to add it at the end of a row, especially if it's a garment where I'm going to have a seam or a pickup, because that way I have a place to weave in the ends on that selvage. So that might be my plan for some garments. For other times, let's say you're working in the round or something on a garment, you're not going to be able to put that in a seam, right? Like there's no seam a lot of times when we're doing garments in the round. So what I will do instead, oh my gosh, my nose, I will try to do the color change or the skein change on a more inconspicuous place. So if I run out of a color like dead center right here, I might actually tink back and do the color change on the side or on the back of the sweater, because no matter how great you are at weaving in ends, there will often still be like a little pool on where you do it. Like it just doesn't look perfect, right? So it's not going to be terrible, but I'd rather it be somewhere like on the side or on the back where it's not going to be, staring me in the face. So that's one strategy, is to be intentional about the location of your skein change. And that might mean that you're, cutting off a few yards of yarn and just discarding it. But I feel like that's okay, unless you're really pressed for yarn. So what I will do, let's say you're in the middle of the row. I mean, this literally could not be. It's nothing special. It's nothing special at all. So if I've just stopped here and I'm adding in, next skein here, and I'm going to use a new yarn, literally, hold on, I have to set this stuff down. All I do is I just like drape the new yarn over and leave a tail, and that's it. I don't do anything special. Okay, so let's see. Can we see that? Oh, it's going to be a little hard to show. One day I'm going to have a tutorial studio and it will be great. So I just go into the next stitch, right? Just like a knit. And then I take my next ball and I measure out like, 8-inch tail or whatever. And I just kind of loop it. Oh, Lordy. I just kind of loop it like that, right? So I've got a tail, I've got this, I haven't made a slip knot, I haven't done a darn special thing. And I just put that loop on my needle. I'm still holding on to both sides, and I pull it through. So that first stitch is in there, and that's all I do. That's literally it. So then when I go do the next stitch, I let go of the tail. So the tail now is hanging in the back. Oh, also, I guess if you're doing a garment flat, and you're changing colors on the wrong side, you can later move your end to the inside of the garment if you need to. But if you're working in the round, right, you're like always facing the outside. So your garment or geez Louise, your tail will fall to the back. But yeah, I just pick up for the next stitch. I just grab my yarn from the ball and I just carry on knitting. And there's one other tip I have for you here. So I do find when I come back around, and this is going to be too hard to show, when I come back around to that first stitch, for me, it often looks like it's twisted the wrong way. So I will usually reorient it to make it look like it's going the right way. So I usually do that when I come back around. And then my last tip for you is when you're weaving in ends. So you're going to have like a little gap, right, from where you added in your new yarn, but you do have a tail from each one. So you've got a tail from the old skein, you've got your tail from the new skein, cross these. Once you've got enough fabric and you're ready to weave in ends or at the end, crisscross them. Okay, I can't really show you that. But I mean, genuinely to close up this hole, you just crisscross them when you weave in the ends. So the end from this side gets crossed over and gets woven in over here. The end from this side gets crossed over and woven in over here, and it closes up any gap. And for me, this is the most seamless way to add in new yarn. That was a really difficult to watch tutorial. I hope that at least my words make sense. Okay, I'm gonna unpick this so that it is not in there. But yeah, that's literally all I do. I just like loop the other yarn in on a new stitch, and I just leave the end behind and carry on my merry way until I have enough fabric to weave in those two ends. And this is how I join yarn for almost everything. I would love to know what the color change technique is that you're talking about. I don't think I do anything special for color changes except I guess join at the beginning of a row. All right, one more question this week is from Jane. I watch you all the time and I love all your podcasts. Thank you. Just wondering, what are your and Kent's future plans? Any more traveling, and if you plan to settle somewhere, where that might be? You seemed so happy in Canada. Is that a possibility? So, we are thinking that we are done traveling full time. We're still going to keep Lydia, our van, for like shorter trips, but I don't really see us doing any big, long trips. We are really ready to settle down. We want to be somewhere, and not like a forever place, like a let's live here for the next 1 to 2 years kind of a place. So we are looking into renting an apartment somewhere new. I would really love to be out west. We did actually get the chance to look at some apartments when we were driving from Alberta back to Tennessee. So we have some options. But yeah, that's kind of what we know so far. Like, I'm really excited to be moving, hopefully sometime in the near future, and getting our own space. My parents have been so generous, and it's been really lovely here, but I am really itching to have our own space again and to be able to like get all my yarn out and, set it all up and start working through the stash that I've accumulated. So those are the dreams and plans of the near future. All right. I will have more questions to answer next week, but I am always looking for more. So if you have any questions for me, please put them down in the comments below and put #question in the front of it so that they're easy for me to find and I can answer them in the next episode. I have just a tiny bit of life highlights this week because, honest to goodness, I've been cleaning and knitting and crocheting, and that's it. Have I been crocheting? No, I guess I haven't been crocheting this week. That was last week when I was finishing up my Canada blanket. So yeah, I haven't done that many interesting things, but I did finish up a massive pile of handmade garments that needed to be washed. I was posting them every day to my Instagram stories, and I said, I need to finish this pile. I'm going to do 1 garment per day. And if I don't do 1 garment per day, please somebody yell at me, because this has been building up. It was a bunch of garments that I had taken with me on our trip. This was one of them included. I had some short sleeves and some tanks. And then I even had some things that I had left here at my parents' that I had worn at some point and just didn't take the time to hand wash. I also had my traveler hoodie, which got wear almost every single day, so that was gross. That needed to be washed. And my Nordlig cardigan, which was in desperate need of being depilled, and I did do that. So I I have a before and after picture of one of the sleeves, and this sweater has become my favorite cardigan since I finished it earlier this year. It is so light, but also so warm and cozy. It's oversized. I love it so much, but girl pills like crazy. So this is my second time I used a gleaner to depill it. It still looks very like worn in and nubby a little bit, but I don't really mind, honestly, but it definitely needed some of those pills to come off. So I did that and I washed it yesterday, and that was my final garment. I think I spent maybe 10 plus days washing a garment every single day. And the only way I was able to do 1 per day, because it's really not the washing so much that's super difficult. For me, it's always the like letting it dry, right? Because who has the space and the time? So luckily I did invest in a spin dryer. It's actually right over here, earlier this year. And that speeds up drying time so, so fast. It also makes it a lot easier to manage that like sopping wet garment. You don't have to use any towels or anything. So I go straight from washing it in my bathroom sink to dumping the excess water and literally just dumping it straight into the spin dryer. It spins out so much water. And then I was usually doing this afternoons and evenings. I would set the garment out. It would dry, you know, halfway overnight. I'd like flip it in the morning, and then it'd really pretty much be dry by the time I needed to do the next garment, which allowed me to only have a small space. Actually, I have 4 of those Knit Picks foam tiles together and to sit drying out. There's like no floor space in this room right now because all of our stuff from our storage unit is in boxes in here. So it's sitting on top of a box, and I'm finally finished, which I'm so, so happy with. And it also has been allowing me to wear my garments because they were a little dirty and I didn't want to wear them. So I was able to pull something out nice to wear last week for the podcast and this week, which was super, super great. So that was a big, big happy thing that happened this week. Something very silly also happened to me this week in regards to knitting. And shoot, I meant to bring it over here, but I use this chalk bag for when I'm knitting and walking. I also use it when I was hiking. You've probably seen a picture of me with this thing. It like straps to your waist. It's meant for chalk for people who are climbers, which is super cool, maybe one day. But I use it for my yarn. It's about the perfect like circumference for a 100-gram skein of yarn. So it fits right down in there, a cake of yarn. And then I walk around the neighborhood and I knit on my little squares. And it's really great. So I was getting ready to take my walk one day this week, and Toaster goes and sits by the door. And when he goes and sits by the door, he's saying, "Hey, I need to go outside." So I thought, okay, I was already like all ready to go, right? Like I had my hat, I had my sunscreen, I had my knitting in my little squares in my chalk bag. And so I walk out the door. He, you know, does his business. We come back inside, or we come up the steps of my parents' porch, and I look down, and on Toaster's head is a strand of yarn, and I'm like, what the heck? And then I realized that strand of yarn goes all the way out into the middle of the yard. And I realized I had dropped out of my little knitting and walking pouch. I had dropped my square that I was working on, not noticed it, turned around, walked all the way back up to the house, and it was just like, you know, the yarn was just feeding out. The yarn stayed. The little ball of yarn stayed in the pouch. It's actually felt on the inside, so I think that's why it stayed. And then the project just, you know, was sitting in the grass. So I had this big, long strand. So I started laughing. I had to take a video. So hopefully we have this in here somewhere to show you. I thought it was so funny. And then I took off my pack. I set it on the porch. I took Toaster, you know, inside, unleashed him, and then got ready to go on my walk. And I just had to like wind. I wound and wound and wound back over to my project. And it made me laugh so hard. I was really lucky that the yarn didn't get through anything gross in the yard. So that was a total win. All right, that is everything for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.